Hello everyone. This is my presentation. Hopefully I'm making it short on test prep. I don't want to tell you everything because I'm just going to, my goal is to give you some idea of what you should be reacting to in your double entry journal. Um, Tests, large scale testing has been around forever. It wasn't until No Child Left Behind, though, that it became this is bad because there were some stakes connected to it. That's the whole definition of a high stakes test is there's some consequences. So when No Child Left Behind was enacted into law, there became consequences for schools that weren't making adequate yearly progress. Of course, now in retrospect, we can see that that adequate yearly progress was ridiculous. That all kids had to be proficient from I think it was 2001 to 2000 and I don't know 12 or something 2015, and of course that didn't happen. Um, so what one of the reasons that I use Popham is because he has a whole chapter dedicated to test prep. What's appropriate, what isn't appropriate, the definitions of teaching to the test, and the two major principles for deciding if a test prep practice is good or it's bad. In this short presentation, I'm going to talk about appropriate and inappropriate test prep practices. I'm not going to mention all of them, but I'm going to talk about ones that I think are where I disagree with Popham. There's going to be some test prep tips. Doug Reeves, I'm going to talk about him just a little bit. What are we going to do with Nicole? Similar scenario as to one you're going to read about in Chapter 8. And then the bottom line. So high stakes testings mean, as I mentioned before, that there's some consequences associated with passing and failing. And even though NCLB is now just in our rear view mirror, we are still looking at schools, and parents are looking at schools' test scores, and the state is looking at schools' test scores to see which schools are doing okay and which schools are struggling. And of course, we've always had them, the SATs, the GREs, the certification exams that you have taken already or that you will be taking, and even the EdTPA is a high stakes test. If you don't pass that, you have to do it again, and that's not something that is very a nice thing, a good thing. And because of the high stakes associated with our state assessments, test prep has moved from a private sector, which it used to be, where you paid for test prep, to the classroom, without much thought and without a lot of training. Um, this is an interesting graphic that I found, and this was back in 1991, so that's 17 years ago, or 27 years ago, or more, depending on when you're watching this. And one of the things that I noticed is down at the bottom, you'll see, although a lot of these things this was before NCLB, you'll notice, giving answers to the test, answering questions about test content. That's a scenario that you're going to comment on in your double entry journal. But the last one, which is the highest, 30%, giving practice on passages highly similar to those in the test. Of course, that's one of Popham's test prep strategies that he discourages, and one which I disagree with him to some extent. Two of the things you should comment on are the guidelines that he mentions. No test prep practice should violate the ethical norms of the education profession. In other words, cheating, filling in answers, all the things that you've probably read about in the papers about ways that schools have been caught cheating, erasing answers and filling them in. So that seems to that's a no-brainer. But then the next one, educational defensibility, is a little more fuzzy. No test prep practice should increase students' test scores without simultaneously increasing their mastery of the curriculum. Um, so that's really aimed at the mindless test prep exercises that we do 2 weeks before the exam. So you should comment on those. There's a decision time vignette that talks about Judy Jameson and Mr. Pelkins. I gave a little different here because this is something I felt really could happen. While proctoring the test, Rob noticed Nicole not only clarifying directions but also giving answers to those students who were in her class. So Rob is a second-year teacher. Nicole is a 10-year veteran and an officer in the local teachers union. Rob doesn't have tenure. So what should he do? I'd love to hear about it in your double entry journal. And the thing here, and I talk about whistleblower, make sure you react to that because whistleblowers have some protection. But again, you have to assess the culture of your school. How is this teacher thought of about with her colleagues? What kind of influence and power does she have in the school? So what do? Do you report him? Do you advise him? Talk to a mentor about him? So I'd be interested in reading how you react to that. So these are the 5 test prep practices that Popham talks about. I'm not going to go into them other than to say that that using a previous form of the test in small doses, I think is appropriate. I think it's okay as long as you do it in moderation, as long as you embed those questions throughout the year and you're not taking 2 weeks and that's all you're doing, and kids get anxious, they hate school, and it does, to me, I don't see how that can increase test scores. But people that don't know anything about appropriate test prep, they think it can. So make sure you comment on those in your DEJ. And the last thing is teaching to the test. This is what you should talk about in your DEJ as well. You should react to. Popham gives 2 different definitions. Teaching to the test items, which is what we're talking about, not being a good practice, and teaching to the curricular aim represented by the test. And to me, that's what we should be doing. And this is the graphic that he gives in his chapter that the teacher's instruction should not be directed towards a specific set of test items, that it should be directed towards a body of knowledge and or skills, or the curriculum represented by the test. This isn't one part of your required readings. It's in ancillary materials, but as you probably know by now, Heather Wapler-Gowan is one of my favorite bloggers. I think she blogs on Edutopia. I'm not sure if it's Edutopia. I think it is Edutopia. And these are some ideas that she has for test prep tips. And the last one is the one really that I think is the best, the building confidence, counterbalancing all the negative crap they hear about themselves. This is important, you can do it, and I'm not going to give up on you. If they go in with confidence, they know exactly what to expect, that you've been focusing on the standards, then they should do well, and they should not have test anxiety. You should mention Reeves's article about writing instead of test prep, and I have that here. It's April 2001, but it's still appropriate today. There's the article, 5 Ways to Make Test Prep Engaging. And the last one is about test anxiety. And this is a pretty thorough article by Spencer Selen, on making test prep, how to reduce test anxiety, what causes it, what's the research on it, and what are some things you can do about it. And this is a little thing that I have about where does test anxiety come from. And it comes from the fact that our tests are important, so parents believe success on test equals good colleges, good schools. So they put pressure on principals. Principals have pressure. Some, I disagree with this, but getting bonuses. Some of them are fired for good, poor test results. I seldom hear about this, but I know it's happening on occasion. And then the teachers. So you can see that it flows downhill, and finally to the students. So you can see where it comes from, and I say slop flows downhill, and this is and you can put any word you want in for that, but again, you as a teacher can be to stop that flow by not putting pressure on your kids to do it. So think about this. You now know what is acceptable after this session, what is acceptable and what is inappropriate. So what do you do when your principal or another administrator pressures you to use one of these inappropriate strategies? Well, Popham recommends that you collaborate with him. And I've had a student do this, and I was very excited about it, because I really don't expect people to take what I give them and then do something with it immediately. I expect you kind of regurgitate this and let it sink in. But this teacher went to a principal and says, I really I have some expertise on appropriate test prep. Can I help you with this? Can I give you some suggestions? Can I talk at a faculty meeting? She did it, and I thought it was wonderful. So there are things you can do. If you're a teacher in a school that does some of these things, be an activist. See what you can do to make it better. Okay, that's it. I'm looking forward to reading your double entry journals, and good luck with that.